international relations, which I hope Miloš is free. If not, I'm going to take over that lecture also. So in terms of first principles, a lot of people find this really tricky, and we kind of have a myth. Maybe it's true in some cases, in debating that principles never win. Unless you are able to show dead bodies or lives that have been saved, you lose the debate. Which I don't think is true, but I understand where this perception is coming from. So that's one difficulty with this whole idea of arguing principles. The other difficulty is there's a predominant perception, it's probably true, that debating kind of has a liberal bias. And thus it is a lot harder to make conservative arguments. We'll talk about that in detail. We will also spend a lot of time making you develop and defend principles and challenge them. Because our topic is how to win with principles. There is one myth, though, that I want to deal with before we go on. So there's this misconception that principles have no impact. And then, that's just not true. There is a very fundamental misunderstanding of the word impact also. An impact really just means a strong effect on someone or something. It could also mean why is something important. So impact shouldn't just be about how much money is saved or what the body count is. You can make a case that something is important even if it is expensive, for example. I mean, that's an impact, right? So don't think that just because you're making a principled argument, you don't have to impact it, you don't have to explain why it's important. Of course, these are different ways the word impact is being used. So, in debates where you talk about the legitimacy of something, you are talking about principles, right? Or when you're talking about people's quality of life and happiness, some discussion of principles come in. So I'll throw some questions at you. And we know that the answers to these things are more complicated, which proves that principles do matter, and not just one version of principles, which is utilitarianism. It's a principle too, but people seem to think it's the most important one. So, for example, what do we ban? What do we consider criminal in society? The most obvious answer is things that have a direct, measurable harm to other people. So killing someone, taking their, taking their children away, there's a very clear, measurable harm, right? But what about fuzzier things? Like nudity, like grotesque art, right? Like maybe even blasphemy. Do we ban or do we not ban these things? Is offense, is disgust enough of a reason to ban things? And there you enter the realm of principles actually in your discussion. Because some of these things, it's very hard to prove a direct effect on other people. You can try and you should. But they might also point to a more principled discussion. We'll get to that in a bit. Why don't we, if utility is all that matters, we all have 2 kidneys, we really just need one. Why isn't it okay for me to just randomly grab a kidney off you and give it to someone who needs it more? We don't think that's okay, right? So even if it saves their lives, so we should probably think harder about why that's not okay, right? Why is it not okay for me to take away your money for coffee to give it to someone who actually needs food? Or maybe you wanted to watch a movie. Why is it not okay for me to say, no cinema tickets for you, that goes to feeding this poor person? Or is it actually okay for me to do that, right? But the fact that you're not sure actually means there are principles that matter and can be defended. So we have dying languages. Why don't we just let them die? Why do we preserve them? So these are questions we will try to answer here. What I'm just trying to illustrate to you is principles are not as obviously difficult as they might initially seem. There are clear and good defenses for certain principles that are not purely utilitarian, right? So, like I said, this idea of liberalism in debating, let's talk a little bit about that. When I say liberal as a political ideology or a political position, what comes to your mind? What are the basic conceptions of liberal? Yeah.
Accepting of different social groups, and they are fighting for the rights of people who don't have them, but are controversial to society, for example, LGBT people.
Okay. So these are things that liberals might end up doing. So they might say, we defend the right of this person to exist, even if other people don't support it. Even if other people don't support your right to exist, we defend you. Where is that coming coming from? Yes.
Freedom to have a good life, freedom of speech, of choice, all sorts of freedom and that allow a human being to live comfortably.
Who is the agent in this freedom? Who should be the locus of this freedom? Who should be enjoying this freedom? Yeah.
It is either the majority of people or the person who is mostly affected by the principle we are applying.
Okay? So that is a conclusion that some liberals arrive at. But fundamentally, who is the center of liberal ideology?
The idea of individuality, like the concept that each human is different and we must respect it.
Exactly. So at the center of liberal ideology is really that the individual and not groups. It's the individual, their own conscious experience, their own understanding of themselves, their uniqueness, their essential dignity by virtue of being individuals, right, is what is important. So the only reason, or maybe not the only reason, but the major reason you would care about the gay person and you're like, I want to defend your rights, is because you think that individual's right is being endangered by society and you want individuals to be able to pursue life and liberty and the good life based on how they have defined it, right? So if this is the starting point of liberalism, how would they view the state then?
A state in which it is not involved in many services like social education, healthcare, economics.
How come?
Sorry?
Why?
Why? Because each individual, being different, it has the capacity of administrating his own rights.
So basically, states do not tell me what to do, right? Let me decide for myself what's important to me. Now, does this mean that all liberals believe that the state should do nothing? Yeah?
Yeah, many liberals believe in positive action and that the state should actively fight for the rights of those minorities who have been disenfranchised by society before that.
Cool. I will accept this. I think we're on track. Did anyone have anything to add? Yes.
Well, the idea that when there are other structural barriers such as societal pressure or even financial and historical harms, the state should be an enabler, so it should make those people have the right to pursue the life or pursue their dreams.
Okay, so you were like, I'm defending the individual. I'm defending the rationality of the individual. They know what they want, mostly. They have a right to a good life. But the world is not fair. Sometimes there are structural barriers. Therefore, the duty of the state is not to actively tell me what to do. I mean, there will always be contradictions internally, right? But it's not to actively tell me what to do or to tell me how to live my life. But it is supposed to create a set of conditions that facilitate my being able to work towards what I want, right? So to increase my options, to increase my choice, for example, towards the outcomes and experiences that I have decided I want. So that's a very common articulation of the liberal paradigm that you are likely to see in debates. I do want to emphasize, I don't want to oversimplify, but even within liberalism there are so many debates and so many disagreements, right? And sometimes you have a motion that pits one view of liberalism against another, actually. Like, the extent to which the state intervenes to facilitate people's rights might be infringing on the rights of other people too, who also use liberal arguments to fight that infringement, right? So both sides could be using liberal arguments or liberal premises, but arriving at different conclusions. So that in itself in debating already allows like liberalism to critique itself, right? But now, so that's liberalism. The individual, but for specific, but there are social ends that can be valuable as well. Now, where does libertarianism come in here? Yes?
It's basically the ideology that the state should have almost no, should not go into people's lives and they should be able to do whatever they want if it doesn't harm other people there. For example, I can go mute in the streets or I can take drugs just because I'm not harming anyone else.
Okay, so libertarianism has a higher bar for like negative freedom. Leave me alone. Right? What else? Let's dissect them. Yeah.
Well, libertarians mainly focus on economic issues and that the state shall have no access into telling the economy how it should work, how people should run their businesses, and give them restrictions such as taxes and etc.
Excellent. So some of the clashes between liberals and libertarians actually do revolve around economic issues. We'll explore them. Yeah.
I think that difference would be on the main purpose of the state. I mean, a liberal would say that the main purpose of the state would be to protect its citizens. However, the libertarian might say that the main purpose of the state is to protect the borders.
Possibly the borders or the desires of individuals specifically. We'll talk about that. Borders are a more libertarian position, and maybe we'll explain why that is the case, right? Okay. So, what do they share? What do liberals and libertarians share? Do they share anything?
Yeah, the right of the individual to express himself however they want.
Yeah. So even if some liberals don't like this idea, a lot of libertarians say, hey, we actually got the seeds of our political ideology from you. And they're like, what? No, we're not related. But libertarians are like, no, actually we have stuff in common. And they do, right? So the emphasis on the individual, and the whole, we're not going to make any judgments on what the good life should look like for each person, like you do you, is something that they kind of share. But again, they differ in terms of the extent of state intervention that they welcome, and also their conceptions of like, how much an individual is entitled to. So a liberal utilitarian, for example, will be like, we give you a lot of choice. They would still support choice, right? But they're happy for certain policies or certain like legal orders or certain like regulations that produce happiness, pleasure, or utility. So to some extent, the liberal perspective is like we really like freedom, but freedom that is useful. So the kind of freedom that we like the most is the kind of freedom that is useful. So where most of us are able to enjoy this, right? Whereas the libertarian is like, where do rights come from? And so they disagree a bit on that. Because to some extent, a lot of liberals are more likely to say, rights come from the fact that by respecting people's rights and enabling rights, most of us can be happy and most of us can live in peace, right? But if you ask the libertarian where rights come from, libertarians can be like, by virtue of being a person, I already am entitled to those rights. So how would they differ in terms of how rights should be allocated? Or in terms of how regulations should happen? Philosophically, where would they differ? Yes.
Well, in the case of liberals, they believe that, for example, if someone has a lot of things, they should take part of the things and give it to someone who doesn't have so much access, so the poor person can access all the possibilities. And libertarians are going to say, no, you have your own rights on your money, your own rights on your way how to live your life, so it is unfair to take that.
Yeah. So in terms of their willingness to accept some degrees of state intervention and regulation in favor of a greater social good, liberals are more willing to accept that. Libertarians are like, I don't care. I don't need to prove to you that respecting my right will be in the social interest or will lead to social good. That's not my problem. By virtue of being a human being, I am an end in myself. Right? Like, my own assessment of whether something is good or not is more important, it's absolutely important. And therefore you can't compare one person's consciousness with many, many others and then go, oh, this is more important because there are many of you. It doesn't matter, that comparison cannot be made. Because by virtue of being human, I therefore like have an absolute valuation and I'm absolutely entitled to my rights, right? I mean, obviously this is to some extent a simplification, but that helps illustrate like a key difference. Yeah.
I asked this just to be sure I have understood.
Sure.
So, in the libertarian concept, the individual is the one who decides whether something is good or bad.
Yeah.
However, in a liberal conception, the society decides based on respecting the individuals.
So not exactly. There's still a strong emphasis on the individual, but there's a greater tolerance and acceptance of government regulation to ensure that society
Okay.
That more people are happy and more people are, there's more utility experienced by all. These things do operate on gradients, and a lot of times you see people holding kind of mixed positions. So some people can be like very libertarian socially, or libertarian socially but economically not libertarian. So you could be like, I absolutely support nudity and gay rights and don't care about people's feelings if they're upset, but I would redistribute wealth. So you know what I mean? So you can be a mix across different issue areas. So it's also a myth that we behave very consistently ideologically. Some people do, but most people vary based on what's on the table or what's at stake, right? So one key, as you guys have been alluding to very strongly, one key difference here is how property is viewed. So liberals tend to make a distinction between human beings and their property. So that they kind of tend to be more permissive towards state interventions in terms of property. So redistributing property or taxing it and things like that. Libertarians insist that property rights, most of them at least, are just as inviolable, just as essential to your person as your personal rights, such as freedom to religion and bodily integrity. So they're like, if you're taking a person's property, that is essentially the same as you stealing their hard work. That is essentially the same as you like stealing practically their personhood as well. And therefore, there are clear differences in terms of what they tolerate, right? Like I said, in terms of policy. Now in debate land, this argument, when argued on an absolute, is quite difficult to pull off because there are many easy responses to it, right? Like for example, well, what about future generations who are not allowed to amass property in the same way you were? By default, then they're never going to get the same kinds of rights that you're asking for by virtue of you concentrating property in your hands. Or, for example, natural resources are not a thing you earned, like they're just naturally occurring and everyone should have a claim to them. Or, for example, that the government does many things to ensure that your property is protected in the first place, like a police force, like enforcing like laws and courts, so you owe the state back. Or the fact that, you know, in the process of you growing up as a human being and acquiring the skills and resources to amass this property, society did stuff and therefore like they're entitled to take something back from you. So the arguments are just a bit easier to rebut. Is this because I have a liberal bias? That's entirely possible. But if you also adjudicate them on that level, I mean, it is a bit unreasonable to believe that property is always a result of your super hard work, especially in the context of inheritance as well. Like, I mean, you can make the argument that parents earn that and they get to decide. They get to decide for their children where their money should go. But that kind of undermines the argument of meritocracy for the children, at least. Or like, what if it is a result of like land grabs and illegal imposition by more powerful actors over less powerful actors? Is that still labor? Is that still merit? So a lot of these things get a bit murkier. So a lot of times the libertarians in debate do struggle to defend an absolute right to property. They try, and I've explained how you might do this by talking about labor. But a lot of times the more effective arguments for libertarians have been the idea of liberalized markets and open markets, and how these things actually contribute better to social welfare, to promoting freedoms for people, and general prosperity. And that is better than saying people have an absolute right to their property. So one example might be to say, if you seize people's property, or if they realize that most of their money will go back to the state in taxes, they significantly lose the incentive to work hard to earn more money, to expand their businesses, to invest in research and development, to take risks. All the things that we enjoy in our lives now, all this innovation in research and development, are a result of many private entrepreneurs feeling like, I have enough money, I'm set for life, I can take this risk. And society benefits from that. But if you take away their safety net, and they're like, oh, well, you're taking everything away, what even is the point? There are no rewards to this anymore. You reduce the incentive. So markets in some way actually create incentives that lead to outcomes that are good for everyone. Or even things like, in your protectionist versus privatization debate, So when Uber was just starting out, everyone was like, Uber's really bad. But that is basically individuals going, the public sector has failed me. Public transport system is not good enough. I will take things into my own hands. Because Uber is essentially kind of like a dating app for riders and drivers, right? And they're like, we're just going to do it. Market forces. Some people are like, but you've undermined labor legislation. You've undermined, you don't pay taxes. Well, they can't because they're not profitable yet. You don't pay taxes. You have undermined the public transport system. You've essentially created like 2 tiers in society where the poor people who can't afford it are stuck with a bad system and the rich people find a way to escape society. But the response would be, actually no, giving people a right to determine the best transport circumstances for them are a good way of redistributing burdens. So therefore, the people who can afford will now pay for services that they need and are willing to pay for, that reduces the burden and the load on the public sector and the public transport system, which frees up more space for other people. And the competition also forces the taxi monopolies and other players to get better and to shape up. Plus the whole consumers now have a choice. This is a great thing. Liberalization of markets equals greater social welfare, equals greater happiness and freedom. So that might be one way to defend it. So instead of talking about the inherent right of people to do whatever they want with their property, it becomes a bit easier to connect liberalization, economic liberalization, and protecting property rights, protecting patents, connecting this to specific outcomes like better research, better economic growth, better choice for consumers that lead to more happiness and social welfare. So that might be a more effective way of arguing libertarianism. Do you have questions at this moment? So it's not just that you're like more people will be in cars. Like I think you might want to highlight like the more good life dimensions of this. So the fact that you have more flexibility over your transportation does mean you have more flexibility over arranging the schedules of your life. For a lot of travelers, like women especially, and the greater sense of safety and assurance in a vehicle that is not unmarked or that is not tightly regulated might also be safer. So these are like kind of utilitarian, but also have strong principle components because they go back to individual choice and welfare. Okay, so that's the libertarian bit. Understand that in debates, property rights, absolute property rights are quite hard to run, but there's a fix, which is markets are actually easier to run in debates, and they are connected to protecting property rights. Okay. Let's talk about another strain of conservatism. So, this conservatism that kind of believes in social groups that are not necessarily state-based. So social groups like religious organizations, the family, or communities, and how either you defend these groups because they're necessary for maintaining the social order, or and in effect you kind of defend the power of these groups over individuals who are either members of these groups or by virtue of like the power of these groups they are affected by it. So even if I'm a gay person who doesn't belong to the church, a conservative argument might be because the church is powerful and it is seen as a source of authority for so many people, they should be allowed to define how policies are conducted with respect to like gay people. So that might be like what a conservative argument looks like. Now, why do you think your theories? Why do you think conservative arguments seem to be less persuasive in debate land? There are many reasons.
Which arguments?
Conservative arguments. So supporting arguments that are based on family, religion, other forms of communities. Yeah.
That to some extent, for example, let's say some religious values are undermining the rights of other people, such as, let's say, many conservative people are against people which are part from the LGBT community to express themselves freely on public spaces, to have the right to marry someone from the same sex, and they're restricting you to a more limited sort of options.
But why do we care? Like, I think as debaters, why do we seem to be more persuaded by what you said instead of the right of the community? Because it's true, we kind of are, but why? Yeah.
Because when we make an argument which is conservative, it is often harming other people. So for the opposition or the opposing team, it's easier to say, yes, this policy is good, but it is harming this particular group, and then explain why it's so important. And from the other side, we have freedom for all people, and it's harder to find faults in our.
A little bit, although I would also argue that the religious group is super harmed when they're gays, because they're sad and like genuinely tormented. So you know how we like making fun of this, right? We're just like, sorry, deal with it. Like no one's like if it's your freedom should end when another person's freedom begins. But if you think about it, as a religious person, if you really believe that homosexuality is a sin, assume for a moment you actually really believe this, and you believe that the consequence is hell. And it's like psychological torture to you to know that your child is gay, right? This is not just feelings. This is like, it affects how you live your life. It keeps you up at night. It's almost equivalent to getting punched in the gut, right? You respond with the same set of symptoms. You feel confused, you feel dizzy, you feel lightheaded. You're like, your sense of social order and stability is also like taken away from you, assuming you really believe this very strongly. So why is this okay? Like, why is this less important than freedom for people? Yeah.
Because one of them is a choice. You choose to be religious.
Exactly. So, part of the reason, I will say something basic and then I will say something a bit more controversial. The basic thing is, in debating, the point of debating is that we derive our arguments from reason. We don't derive our arguments from other sources of authority. The point is, you are making the argument, right? So we don't go, this is what the Bible says, therefore it's correct. We don't go, this is what my grandmother said, therefore it's correct. Like the premise of debating is that we challenge traditional authorities in the first place. Like that's how the format is structured, right? And in effect, because that is how the format is structured, we are just naturally less likely to accept arguments that say, this is what my religion says, therefore to me this is what is true and important. And we're like, yeah, but why? As rational individuals, why does that is true and important? Right? And you know what? We can't blame debating for that completely, because that is the premise of the activity. That the good thing about the activity is seniority doesn't matter. Your authority doesn't matter. So if I'm a first year student debating against a PhD person, who cares? The point is, our arguments are equal. We're equal here. So then how do you square that with the idea of communities deciding for people based on other more traditional sources of authority? So that's one thing that happens. But if you're conscious of that, then you find ways to work around that system and to stylize the conservative arguments while accounting for that, and we'll talk about how. The next thing is, the other truth is that some conservative arguments are just inherently harder to defend. And not all. A lot of them, like the right to religion, is actually quite defensible, but some others are a bit harder to defend. Before I go on, yeah.
I think there are also some other problems for which the conservative arguments are harder to get, to understand, to assimilate than liberal arguments. Like, first of all, because we as individuals who are participating in debate tournaments and want to understand principles and so on and so forth, somehow already have a confirmation of assuming these rights as inherent.
Yeah.
And second of all, is actually as a reason for the first one, because we inherently believe these rights are true and absolute. We hardly find it to empathize with groups of people who actually believe in religious value.
So the second part I think is really sad, because the first part is true in that a lot of debaters I know are quite liberal. But at the same time, not all. I do know some debaters who are quite socially conservative, who don't believe in abortion. I really struggle with this, but they don't. Or who, some of them are more uncomfortable with LGBT rights, which again I'm like, but I'm just trying to illustrate, not all debaters are liberal, a lot are. But I think part of the reason liberal arguments also succeed is because we So debates are happening in an environment where it's the best common denominator. So you have so many cultural differences among the participants, age and value differences. So it's harder to say, let us all unite under Catholic ideology and then use that as the standard of this debate, versus the most common standard is the individual. That's what everyone has in common, so that's kind of easier to impose. And thus the choice arguments make a lot of, like when I ask you to break the tie between like the religious people suffering and the gay person, you're like, yeah, the difference is choice, right? I mean, we can have a back and forth there and talk about how in some cases religion might not actually be a choice, but still, this whole idea of, yeah, but as an individual, you can distance yourself from the institution and choose. So choice arguments have such a hold over us as debaters. Whether this is a bad or a good thing is less clear, and we will have those to test it. But I just wanted to give you some perspective of why also certain types of arguments tend to stick more in the circuit. Alright. Now, usually, when conservative arguments are used, and when they're used successfully, usually what happens is people kind of, the speaker themselves, they don't quite agree with the values, but what they say is, society does, many people in society do, and they have a right to believe this, but even if you don't believe they have a right to believe it, they do believe it, right? And therefore imposing a liberal alternative to them is going to be quite dangerous. Here are the harms of that. So that's usually a lot of times how people persuade people of the conservative argument. So, which you can do, because you can defend the principle and then add this on top of that. So, let's say redistribution in the penal system, right? A lot of debaters, not all, but a lot of debaters are kind of allergic to the idea of revenge. Like we're always like, no, moral high ground. Like we must forgive people and rehabilitate them, but revenge is such like a base emotion that is hard to justify. But then if you have to explain why retribution belongs in the justice system, how do you really explain it? So I guess you can go, it restores the victim's sense of justice in a very visceral way. One of the arguments is always, if society doesn't feel that justice is done, because for justice to be done, people need to feel that it is done, right? And if society doesn't feel that it is done, then they are likely to take justice into their own hands and themselves enact this justice. So if there's no retribution, if someone rapes someone and then after 6 months of rehabilitation they're back in society, you are likely to have society taking up vigilante justice and themselves pursuing the perpetrators. So basically, you're not really committing to the conservative argument. You're not really like, I believe this. But you're like, enough people believe this, that we should accept that this is a way we regulate our society. Like, it's a moral regulation based on the morals of society, right? Otherwise, things will be worse. Might be one way to run the argument. Do you have any questions at this point about this? Even Marxism in debating. I'm just gonna add. So now, in your generation maybe, people think Marxist arguments are liberal. But actually, Marxist, or in some spaces, people mock Marxist arguments all the time, like in debate shit posting, you're like, please don't run the Marxist extension. Or I hate Marxist extensions. And I mean, there might be a reason why it's hard to run Marxism in debates. Because
nobody knows the theory.
So nobody knows the theory is one. Two, in debating you have fiat, right? So you kind of assume that the policy will happen. So a lot of arguments like it's not going to happen because the elites will not allow it to happen, that goes away. Because you kind of have to assume it will happen. So you kind of like magic away some part of the Marxist argument with a fiat for pro. Second is, it is hard to explain the theory or even if people understand it in the first place in 7 minutes. So what a lot of people do now is they do Marxism light. So you borrow from Marxism to certain ideas like false consciousness. Do you know what false consciousness means? Let's go through it. What do you think false consciousness means? Deduce. Assume you know nothing and then you saw this word. What might false consciousness mean? Yeah.
The fact that individuals are not and do not actually have a real individuality, is a social construct and people somehow depend on the society, like ants depend on each other?
Not quite. Not yet. But I see why that was your guess. Okay, false consciousness.
Well, you do not have the right on your own labor. You do not choose to work. You're just forced by society to go to work and accept the status quo.
So this is a step above that. That's a different concept in Marxism, right? Alienation of people from their labor. They are related, but it's not quite that yet. Yeah.
Maybe it's a concept where the government is kind of giving the choice, but the outcome from the choice is the same.
Okay, so that is one possible cause of it, right? False consciousness is when the argument, obviously some people find it quite patronizing, is when you think you prefer a specific situation that might not actually be in your interest. So for example, I as a woman, I like wearing high heels, I don't, but I say I do. Say I like wearing high heels and wearing lots of makeup and spending lots of time on how I look. And if you ask me, so this is not my position, I'm just illustrating false consciousness. So if you ask me, do you really like that? And I'm like, yes, I love it, I enjoy it, and I mean it. Then someone can go, but that's a false consciousness. Because you have been bought into this idea that was constructed by society and by many other people around you. So Marxists usually believe that it's the elites who control the means of production. If you control capital, if you control the means of production, eventually you're going to start controlling even people's ideas and what they think about it. Which is why they kind of consent to be in this system where they are oppressed. So you're alienated from your neighbor. All of these things are quite bad, but part of the reason you don't rise up against it is because you are somehow persuaded that this is how it should be, or that it's okay, or that this is something you actually want to do or enjoy, right? So false consciousness. Some people might say some choices look like choices, but they're actually a product of false consciousness. You don't fully understand what's good for you or what is in your interest. Of course, you can see how this argument can be very patronizing sometimes. Because you'll be like, why have you assumed that I have not thought about all of those things, and on top of that still prefer this, right? But it's a powerful analytical tool. Another one is adaptive preferences. So, you have a very limited and narrow set of options. They're not ideal. If you are asked, you would prefer to have more, but this is all you have. So therefore, you adjust your preferences accordingly and say, I am happy with this. Some people are like, that is bad and that is dangerous. Like a lot of supposedly like poor people or people who work in gangs manifest this false consciousness or adaptive preference, which is a reason for the state to intervene and correct it. But some people are like, no, we need to trust people to know what they're talking about, actually. The analogy for adaptive preference, I forget, it's like this fox who really, really wanted the grapes from the tree, but then couldn't reach the grapes. So then the fox goes, I never really wanted it anyway, it's really sour. Right? So false consciousness, adaptive preference. That's something that comes from Marxist theory. What other concepts are there? So alienation, the concept you talked about, being alienated from their work. But a lot of times when debaters use like Marxism light for some concepts from Marx, some of them are quite helpful. They reapply it to policies that are not as radical. So except for the test world final, most of the time you don't really have debaters arguing that the capitalist order must be destroyed, right? Or like abolishing private property. Usually the conclusion is a little bit like liberal or socialist in the sense of like higher taxes, whatever, or protections for workers or unions, but no one really is going to go, therefore the conclusion of my argument is the abolition of the capitalist order. So what I'm trying to say is Marxism or Marxist ideas or things that you draw from Marxism can have a place in debating, but be conscious of like how far they can go and what other additional work you have to put in when drawing on them. Yeah.
Let's say we have a motion like this house believes that global poor should pursue a Marxist revolution. Mm-hmm. In this kind of context, if it is actually really hard for beginner intermediate debaters, even for some advanced supports to propose a real strong Marxist stance, doesn't actually make the motion or the way we perceive debate as off-biased?
Yes, but it can be done. So if that is your motion, it's actually easier abroad. Because you don't have to spend too much time explaining like exactly how this revolution is going to look like, but you do have to. Because it's clear that the moment, so this is how do I explain this? It's a bit meta. By setting this motion, the CA team is sending a message. The CA team is sending a message to everyone that they think it's a balanced debate. And judges, we are instructed that when we enter a debate and we watch it, we must assume it is a fair debate. Even if I personally feel it's an imbalanced motion, I don't mind this motion actually. If I personally feel it's an imbalanced motion, I have to disregard that. And I have to pretend that it is. My loyalty is to this idea of balance. I have to be open-ended about it, right? So the mere act of setting that motion is kind of like sending a message already that do not discount the government side. Because there is a case for the government side. Which kind of jolts the judges into being a bit more open-minded about it. Is this actually how it works in the real world? No. Can I promise that it's how it works? No. With top judges, I think so. And as much as possible in briefings, so like for EUDC, we will obviously tell the judges that the fact that we have set the motion means we think it's biased. It's not biased. And even if you disagree, you need to convince yourself that that is not the case. You need to assume a different identity of like an open-minded neutral observer, right? So part of the work is being done by the actual, by virtue of setting it, right? Now, in terms of whether it is easy or hard for teams to do this, I don't think it's that hard. I think you can actually prove a strong principal argument of proportionality plus absence of alternatives plus self-defense for why this is necessary and only this. Because if you do small acts of resistance, either they make no impact, or they are co-opted, or we are crushed anyway. So in that case, we might as well go for broke and have a giant violent revolution, right? So that's a thing you can argue. I think it can be done. I mean, OG won the round. Yeah. But it is rare that people encounter motions like that. Most motions are more middle ground socialist stuff, not destroying the capitalist order.
Okay, so if we want to accept some analyze and build some Marxist arguments, we have to be sure that they are actually reasonable in a sense, not that.
Okay, I'm not saying that Marx is unreasonable. But exactly, you need to have control over the material instead of letting the material take control over your case. So you have to be sure this is the only aspect for Marxism that I am borrowing, and what do I intend to do with this, and what do I intend to achieve with this has to be clear to you. Otherwise, you just sound like some shouty undergrad who doesn't really understand Marxism but likes throwing the words around, right? So you need to just be careful about how you're using it and know how you're using it. So in some debates, you will be using it for more radical policies. Like, there are some motions that are like confiscating property of people if they don't live in these houses, right? Or like that taking away most of people's wealth after a certain standard of life has been met. So there's room to be a bit more radical here. But the policy is like free daycare center for mothers. Maybe you don't have to abolish capitalism, but just reform it, right? So just to illustrate, for Marxists, the elite and the ruling class control the means of production, which also allows them to control like the superstructure and like our ideas and how we think of the world, how we think of our relationships with each other. Marxist feminists, what they add to this is they say the elites usually tend to be men. So not only do they control the specific social order, they do it in a very specific masculinized way, such that our conceptions, this isn't exactly this lecture, but I'll just throw it in, it's useful in life, such that our conceptions of reality, of the market, of labor relations, are very, very gendered. So for example, the distinction between paid and unpaid work is very, very gendered. Women predominantly, so I'm not sure what it's like in Bulgaria, I recognize context might be different. In most of the world, women predominantly perform more household chores, do more reproductive work, and caring work at home. So caring for elderly relatives, caring for children, being pregnant is, well, a thing men can't do, I wish they could be. Then we will have abortion rights everywhere. But like, being pregnant and all of these things, is labor performed by women? But it's not. Is it included in the GDP? Nah. Is it considered productive labor? Nah. Are women paid for it? Absolutely not. And where did this distinction come from? Who decided what is productive and not productive? Like, why is raising a child and teaching it to read and cleaning its poop not productive? Like, that's not clear to me, right? But people will go, that's because the market is gendered. So, when you compute for a nation's gross domestic product, right, and like basically a measure of its productivity and growth, someone goes to a store and buys an egg. The only thing you record is the purchase of that egg, consumption of the egg. That's what goes to your audit of like productivity. What is invisible there? That it is likely a woman who went home and cooked it and fed it to her family. So some feminists will argue that the capitalist order as we understand it, productive labor as we understand it, is happening on the backs of unproductive, partially coerced labor of women. By partially coerced, so that's where like, you have the false consciousness bits also. But even if it's not false consciousness, the fact that society expects us to perform this labor, kind of also, we're not inherently better at it, but because society expects us to do it, women just become a bit better at it, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because women are expected to be better parents, they are better at caring for the kids. Because that's the expectation. Otherwise, you kind of get judged for it. And then society goes, well, that's why it's divided that way, because you are better. And you're like, but there's no reason why I should be better at this, except a historical expectation, right? So anyway, that's the Marxist feminist contribution to the Marxist debate. There are spaces of disagreement there as well. Anyway, I guess that can be used in principles too. The next principle I wanted to discuss as a case study before we move on to exercises is the idea of consent, and choice, which really comes up a lot in debates. And a lot of times the team that has the more sophisticated and reasonable characterization of what choice looks like is the team that wins. So you situate this a lot in big state, small state debates, right? Whether states should intervene in people's behaviors. A lot of times the reason is no, because people chose for themselves. Whereas the other side is like, yeah, but how real is this choice? That's usually a lot of it. What are some dimensions of the choice debate? So the most basic way, the most superficial way of establishing choice is to say people have formally consented to things, right? They have agreed to doing it. Therefore it's okay. But a lot of people challenge that and say that's not enough. In cases of addiction, for example, why is the discussion of choice complicated in cases of smoking or gambling? Yes? Because your environment may be a reason that you started smoking in the first place, and it wasn't something that, for example, you could choose. Because maybe if you were in a state of bad mental health, then those are factors that you didn't necessarily control. Won't you just realize that and stop doing it? So this is a good first layer. Yeah. Next layer. So my question then is, I'm just going to stress test and force you to respond. So okay, but then you're just like, alright, that was bad, now I'll stop. Behind you, sorry.
There's the physical part of it, which is a compulsion to continue doing it and increase the dosage, which essentially robs you of your choice. Even if you have partially chosen in the beginning, later it's much more difficult to take one of the choices. It becomes a much less likely option for you. So there's a physical or chemical component to this, which is there for hard to resist because you're kind of like at war with yourself, right? Okay, so there are two parts of you and two like different versions of choice happening here. Yes? There's also a social compound which influences you a lot in the direction of still keeping a habit because everyone in your circle do it. So because everyone in your circle do it, you feel like doing it for being integrated or for being understood in a way or another. So high degree of social pressure, because if you give it up, you might trade off other values that are important to you as well, like belonging, access to like support groups and secrets and stuff like that. Okay. So I think this might be one way to complicate the discussion of choice. Of course, the response is individuals are aware of these risks and they're in the best position to adjudicate for themselves, like how to manage these risks, and they can always seek help. So that's the response. But if you are the side that's defending a ban on smoking, I think you really have to put a lot more work into showing why consent in many cases is a false one.
So another example would be, since we did mention it, cosmetic surgery, for example. So how would you show that the choice to engage in cosmetic surgery, because one side has been like, let people choose. Why is choice a complicated discussion here? Yes?
Because in many societies, especially in the West, you have a lot of, let's say, billboards, advertisements, beauty healthcare products that are, in a way, shaping the perception of what is considered beautiful in that society. So basically, a lot of women are deciding to change their bodies because they want to fit into this description of beauty. So, in their opinion, this is something that the society has implemented into their minds. And many of them believe that if they do not do this plastic surgery, they're never going to be considered beautiful.
So there is a lot of conditioning that's happening. Yeah. Some of it you don't even notice and you don't realize. And if you don't realize it, can you actually choose to opt out of it, right? If you're just surrounded by it. So some of the choice is the kind of choice that disables your rationality. You can't even apply rationality to it because it just seems so natural, it just seems so obvious to you because of all the advertising. And then your fear, I think these are two different characterizations. They get along. And then the second is your fear of if you don't conform to this, therefore you will be ugly, which is that there are very real consequences on you, like insecurity, depression, potentially like eating disorders and things like that. So if these are the costs, is that even still a choice though? But okay, what else you were going to say?
I think that a choice is only a choice when you're having all the information on the table. And in this case, because it is a market that's run for profit, the plastic surgeries, the advertisement with all the information is how good it is because the companies don't have the incentive to say how bad it is. So you don't actually know how bad it is. And because it is a little presence of the information, you don't really have a choice. You don't really pay for information.
So you don't even have access to information. Yes. Yes?
But if you knew what is all these bad sequences, is it still, have we still have this moral obligation to stop it?
Okay. So if someone goes, look, you are subject to some degree of counseling. We are happy to live in a world where we counsel you and we identify the medical risks. If despite all of these things you're still willing to go, isn't that just a free choice at this point? If information is the problem, what if we provide the information? Of course, one answer is there's some information that you aren't even conscious is acting upon you. But of course, you've weakened it, right? Because you're like, well, we'll give you everything we possibly can. Then what else?
I'm also thinking of the idea that in the context of which all the psychological studies show that even if there are some criteria of being the perfect partner for mating, the completion is still random. It doesn't really matter if you're beautiful or ugly in the end, and so on and so forth. And this kind of cosmetical surgery just exploits the feelings, the weaknesses of people who want this kind of service. And you can easily argue that this choice is not a free will choice in which everything is compared, but a choice based on frustrations.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. That is connected to what he said. I think you put these two together, right? And go advertising and the cosmetic injury and cosmetic surgery industry are very predatory in terms of how they approach it. They know precisely what vulnerabilities to hit, what buttons to tick. So a simple document that tells you these risks is not going to counter psychological manipulation that makes you feel vulnerable and insecure. You could say that. What else? Yeah.
Well, a lot of human rights stop to the point where you can harm other individuals. And if you can prove that performing cosmetic surgery, especially on people who would be shown, such as public figures and generally people who would start to enact those stereotypes, so they would continue to reinforce them, you're in effect limiting other people's choices.
Excellent. So there's that element of influencers and influential individuals. That connects this to a point I'm going to try to get us to make. Has anyone heard of the term collective action problem? Collective action problem. Yeah. Do you want to try?
Yeah, that's why no one wanted to answer the question.
Okay. So collective action problem is a situation where there is clearly a correct action. Something should be done. But the cost of undertaking this action is very high. So unless people do it together, it's difficult for a single actor to do it by themselves because they absorb all the costs. Right? Yeah.
For example, with private schooling, we know that
Explain. It's a good example.
We know that private schooling in general gives more opportunity to some people than others, and it's inherently bad for society as a whole. But poor people know that if they don't send their children to private schools, they will not be able to succeed. And in that way, many poor people participate in that private schooling, and they hand themselves to that.
So I'm never going to be a mother, but if I was, I'll be like, private school is harmful because all of the resources get siphoned into private schools. They entrench social inequality because of the networks that happen, because that are formed that exclude some people in society. And if wealthy people go to private schools and these wealthy people become alumni and just donate back to private schools, and there's no pressure on the state to improve public education because the wealthy people in a position to pressure the state can't be fucked, right? So I know the private schools suck. But I'm like, but I have one child and I can't get to control the actions of other parents. Now if I take this principled stance and don't send my child to private school, other parents will still send their kids to private school. So I am therefore choosing to disadvantage my child in my hopes of like resisting and challenging this unfair system. And like, it sucks. Now if only more parents started thinking like me, that would be great. But that's where the collective action problem kicks in, because why will they? Because they're also all thinking what I'm thinking, right? And so that then becomes a justification for the state to impose a uniform policy, just ban all private schools. And that gets around this collective action problem. Same is true for environment, right? Like, there's a pond with lots of fish. You don't have regulations. We're all fishers. The best solution is for us to fish sustainably. But who's gonna start that? Because if I fish sustainably, but I have no guarantee that you will, so I bring home 2 fish from today, but you're like fishing everywhere in the lake, then I'm screwed. So I might as well just also do it, even if we all know we're screwed in the near future, right? How do you apply this to the case of cosmetic surgery? Collective action problem in cosmetic surgery and choice. Yeah.
Well, if we had no surgery, many people would be like less beautiful, and thus they would not have to apply those cosmetic surgeries. And when we have a net less beautiful people, being more beautiful does not impact society. But if somebody goes into cosmetic surgery, that automatically raises the bar of...
Yeah. So it's not so much we will have a less beautiful society, although that's one part. I think the last part you said, I think, is more important. It raises the bar of what we can reasonably expect from people. You don't feel like it's a real choice. If other people around you are choosing this, and then you don't choose it, and then you were disadvantaged for not choosing it. So you're kind of in effect blackmailed into choosing it, even if you otherwise would not have wanted to. And then people start expecting it of each other, right? People are like, if she did it, why can't you? And then you're like, but I have this PhD and degree. And they're like, she has a PhD and a nice nose. And so you're like, now I need to do it. Right? I'm cracking jokes here, but you get the point, right? You get what I'm trying to say, yeah.
Can we also argue about the fact that capitalism is advertising for manipulating people's desire and like banning surgical operations? We can, we can also hit the capitalism against.
A little bit, although you're not going to beat capitalism completely with this notion. So this is what I mean about controlling how you use it. So you use it in characterizing how pernicious and insidious and predatory this advertising is, right? You don't even notice it's happening, but it's happening. Even progressive messages are being co-opted, and so you think it's a feminist thing, but it's not. If you look at all these like body positive ads for Dove and everyone else, the women have great skin. Okay, so maybe some of them are not size 0, but their hair is great, their skin is great, their teeth are great. So even the more progressive versions are still reinforcing this. So you explain the many ways in which it's quite predatory. And then you go, this is what capitalism does because it's profit-driven, fine. But the other side is going to go, okay, if you ban cosmetic surgery, capitalism will still have other things to sell to people and still kind of resort to this. So makeup, heels, how you look, how you dress, your weight, like things that you can remove or erase from cosmetic surgery. Of course, on the other side, you can go, yes, but the less avenues you have, the better. So that's the back and forth. But all I'm saying is, this is not about, capitalism is not what's going to win you the debate. Like, in this motion, weakening capitalism is not what's going to win you the debate. But using the way capitalism operates to demonstrate why the choice is a false one can help you win the debate. So how do you want to use your capitalist critique matters. Is that clear? So use it as part of your identification of the problem. But that is not your conclusion. You don't need to solve capitalism in this motion. Okay, any other questions? Let's do drills. Oh wait, was I done with my choice stuff? No, there's one more. Okay, so we've done addiction. There are two actually. Okay, power. So actually the other one, let's just do it in a debate. In terms of power dynamics in a relationship, that also matters and may affect choice. So you know this whole debate about polygamy or incest. And people are like, but they're okay with it. And people go. But when you allow a choice, but you graft that into a pre-existing structure or a pre-existing relationship where the actors are not operating on equal terms, then that option is less likely to be exercised freely. So an example would be polygamy in certain religious communities. So without polygamy, the community was already quite heterosexist and also privileged men. Men had the power positions, men had access to capital and property. So it's not an equal relationship. Now you insert this option in a situation where the relationship isn't equal. How do you think the choice will play out? So you are likely to have more men being able to exercise this, but not accessibly being available to women anyway. So is that really a choice in this case, right? Might be a thing you say. Alright, let's do drills. I will throw you, just divide the groups so it's efficient. So the three people at the most behind, yes, and then you. So join them. And then the four people in the middle, you're working together. So three people at the back. And the people at the back, I need you to think about the debate, duels to the death. Dueling.
Dueling.
Right? That is the trap. My weird dueling action.
As a fact, I actually understood